Good afternoon. Welcome, everyone. We'll get started in just a minute. Welcome, everyone. People are still joining, so we'll get started in just a minute. Good afternoon. I think most people have been able to get in the call now, so welcome to today's webinar. My name is Jennifer Erf, and I'm with the Massachusetts Association for Mental Health. I am pleased to be your moderator today for the fourth and final webinar in our webinar series, How Much is Too Much? Today we'll be talking about food and nutrition with our guest expert, Dr. Sheri Cheung. Welcome, Sheri. So how much is too much when it comes to calories, sugar, salt? How can we learn to eat healthier? We'll provide insights about all those questions when our presentation begins in just a few minutes. So we're very pleased to have so many people on the webinar today. This series is a collaboration among AARP Massachusetts, the Massachusetts Organization for Addiction Recovery, known as MORE, and the Older Adult Behavioral Health Network at MEMH. So I really want to thank our planning committee, Kathy Betts and Kara Cohen from AARP, Marianne Frangelis and Julie Bunch from MORE, and my colleague Cassie Kramer at MAMH. We also have special thanks for the input we received from Carol Gerard at the Massachusetts Department of Public Health. These are all individuals who care deeply about and champion access to behavioral health support for older adults, and putting together this webinar series as a collaboration has been a true delight. This is a Zoom webinar, which is a little different from a Zoom meeting in that the cameras and mics for all of the participants are turned off. The good news is that means you can feel free to eat lunch while you're participating in the webinar, and you can still participate actively. If you have comments or questions, put them in the Q&A box. You'll see that at the bottom of your screen and the banner at the bottom. Your questions will be seen only by the webinar organizers, and then we may consolidate some of them and presenting them to the audience so we can get in as many of your questions as we have time for in this hour. If you'd like to use closed captioning, you can also turn that feature on by using the button at the bottom of the screen. Today's webinar is being recorded. You'll be sent a copy of the recording a few days after the webinar. And now to the main event. It is my pleasure to introduce Dr. Sheri Cheung. Dr. Cheung is a physician practicing at Hilltown Community Health Center in Huntington, out here in Western Massachusetts, where I live. And she specializes in weight management and nutrition. She's certified by the American Board of Obesity Medicine, and she's co-host of the podcast, Love Food, Live Well. She's a 1996 graduate of Tulane University School of Medicine, and she completed her residency at Bay State Medical Center in the year 2000. Dr. Cheung has a brief presentation to ground us all in some core principles about food and its relationship to overall health. And then after that, we'll come back for a more informal discussion and your comments and questions. So Dr. Cheung, I'm going to turn this over to you now. Thank you for joining us.
Great. Thank you so much, Jenny. I'm very excited to be here. I appreciate the invitation. Welcome, everyone. So eating as we age, how much is too much? I actually expanded this title a little bit. So it's the who, the why, the what, the when, and the how of healthy eating. Before we get started, I'd just like to read a little bit of a disclaimer. This session is intended to be informational and educational and does not constitute medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. You should always seek the advice of a physician or other qualified healthcare provider for diagnosis and treatment of your specific medical needs, for questions regarding personal health or medical conditions, and before beginning or changing any treatment, activity, program, or dietary plan. AARP and myself are not responsible for the consequences of decisions or actions taken in reliance upon or as a result of the information provided during this event. And so here are the objectives for today. I'll speak about 20 to 30 minutes and then have plenty of time for questions. So firstly, recognizing that obesity and overweight is in fact a disease process. Secondly, understand the science of insulin resistance, just a little bit. We won't get too scientific, I promise. Explore the role of nutrition in the aging process. So first, our definition. Obesity is a chronic multifactorial disease caused by an increase in body fat that promotes adipocyte dysfunction and abnormal physical forces, resulting in adverse metabolic, biomechanical, and psychosocial consequences. I know that's a mouthful, but it really helps to underscore the fact that this is not a simple diagnosis. This is very, very complicated. I will add that the diagnosis is usually based on something called BMI, which is a body mass index. This is a relatively crude tool for diagnosing obesity, but it's kind of the best we have. And it's based on a height-weight ratio. A BMI greater than 30 is considered obese at this time, and a BMI between 25 and 29 would be considered being overweight. And why does this matter? Why does this definition matter? The main reason I truly feel that we have to realize this definition is important is because we have to take the blame away from our patients and from our clients and from ourselves. We have to urge the medical community and the community as a whole to spend the time and resources that this diagnosis deserves. Just sitting there in the waiting room or in the exam room and saying, you should lose weight is not enough. We really have to treat it as a disease. So who are we talking about here? Who was impacted? And unfortunately, it's becoming more and more prevalent in the United States and actually worldwide as well. But in the US, currently, about 50% of adults are obese, meaning a BMI of over 30. And about 75% of adults are overweight, which means a BMI over 25. The other concerning issue is that childhood obesity is growing exponentially. I know children aren't my audience today. I'm sure all of you are young at heart, but I think it's important to realize that it's a problem because guess what? You all have children, grandchildren, nieces, nephews, friends that are young. They look to us, they look to you as role models. And, eating is a social event. We like to eat together, we like to be together. And it's so important to be a role model and, show good behavior and being responsible around eating. Also, I have to give a little disclaimer here. I am a pediatrician, so that's a little plug as well. So why does weight matter in the first place? We have a BMI of 27. Is that something we have to be concerned about? And these are some other statistics that really intersect quite well with the idea of obesity and being overweight. 82% of adults in the United States have some form of metabolic disorder. And we're realizing that the link between metabolic disorders and being overweight is very, very tight. Insulin resistance, for instance, is directly related to weight. And the other reason it really matters is that, we want a quality of life. We don't just want to live until we're 99. We want to live till we're 99 and be happy and healthy and be able to spend time with our grandchildren. All right, so this is my first science slide. This is insulin resistance. And basically what this describes is what happens in our bodies to sort of disturb our metabolism that can then lead to us being overweight. Basically, anytime we eat anything, especially when we eat carbohydrates, our pancreas secretes insulin. So the insulin's hanging out in our bloodstream. The cells see the insulin. If it sees too much insulin, so let's say you eat, a huge amount of carbohydrates for dinner, the cells will start to realize, oh gosh, there's too much insulin in my bloodstream. So they will start to resist that. They'll sort of deregulate their receptors so they're not uptaking as much insulin. Our body responds to that by making more insulin. And so eventually we have so much insulin in our bloodstream that we can't maintain it anymore. And then our glucose levels, our sugar levels in our bloodstream start to get high as well. And that's why we have high blood sugars leading to diabetes. And sugars also, besides just causing diabetes, actually cause inflammation all over the body and can cause all kinds of other disease processes. So yes, having insulin resistance definitely causes diabetes, but it also causes polycystic ovarian syndrome. It causes inflammation of the liver. It can contribute to atherosclerosis, to heartburn, to a low HDL level, which is the good cholesterol in our body. So we want that number to be high. And it also causes elevated triglycerides, which is another part of our cholesterol panel. It can eventually cause fatty liver and then cirrhosis. It definitely contributes to high blood pressure. And then again, as we talked about, it can lead to diabetes, as well as leading to being overweight. And so truly, when we talk about helping someone with their weight or with their obesity, really what we want to do is help them with their insulin resistance, because that in turn will then help with weight. It also helps to take the focus off of the BMI number and really puts the focus where it belongs, which is in helping to treat disease processes. So why do we eat? Of course, we eat for fuel and for energy, but that's not the only reason we eat. We eat to be social. We eat because it's fun. Food's delicious. Sometimes we eat because of peer pressure. You know, you're sitting with your mother-in-law and she says, hey, you have to eat this last piece. It's, you know, saved it for you. And so you eat it. You eat to celebrate. So it's my birthday. Of course, I'm going to have a piece of birthday cake. So we eat for all kinds of positive emotions. We also eat for negative emotions. We're sad, you know, just broke up with my boyfriend. I deserve this pint of ice cream. Or we're lonely. And we've seen a lot of this during the pandemic, where we're stuck at home, we're bored, we're lonely. So what do? We learn to make sourdough bread and eat a lot of it. And then we also eat because of environmental pressures. So, you know, you walk into your office and someone brought donuts for the office, and so they're right there. And it's really hard when something's right in front of you to say no to it. For me, the example I always use is when I walk into a room and smell bacon. It's absolutely impossible not to eat the bacon. So, you know, smells, availability, all of that really matters. So why do we overeat? And that's really the question. And in the medical community, as well as in America in general, it's often been thought of as a moral failing, a lack of willpower. It's your fault. You should just stop eating. And those are proven time and time again to be absolutely untrue. It really has so much more to do with genetics, with our hormones. And it's basically anytime we eat, our hormones will release into our bloodstream. So we'll have leptin that's released, and leptin is one of the hormones that reduces our hunger. And if we need fuel and our body feels we need fuel, we'll release ghrelin into our systems, which is the hormone that's responsible for making us hungry. But everybody has different levels of leptin and ghrelin in their systems based on their genetics. And so if you have someone that has a leptin deficiency, so they're always hungry, it's kind of irresponsible to expect them to constantly fight against that hunger. It's truly their genetics they're having to fight against. Eventually, when we can figure out how to fix the genetics, this will be a moot point, but we're not quite there yet. Addiction, I put with a question mark. There's a lot of controversy surrounding whether or not overeating or eating in general or eating too much can actually be defined as an addiction. I really think of it as a continuum, and I don't think we really need to come up with the answer for sure on whether or not it's an addiction, as long as we recognize that it's important to help people learn how to be able to stop eating when they want to stop eating. Calories in, calories out. Wouldn't it be great if eating and losing weight were as simple as this? Just eat less calories and you will lose weight, you'll be all set. Unfortunately, it is not. This is more what it looks like. So you eat something, carbohydrates, protein, fat, you can see on the left side of the slide there, all get metabolized through different pathways. A lot of the hormones that are secreted are actually secreted from our stomach. So you can see that where it says gut, and then you have hormones that are released. Some of these might sound familiar to you, GLP-1, GIP agonists, which are pretty popular right now. That would be Ozempic, Wegovy, et cetera. But there are lots of others, as you can see, lots of other hormones along those pathways. So I'm gonna let you guys look at this slide maybe about 10 seconds or so you can memorize it. There will be a quiz at the end. Okay, that's all you've got. So what should we eat? Do the kind of calories matter? Do the quality of calories matter? And as you can probably guess, my answer is yes, they do. So this is a little story. Once upon a time, about 200,000 years ago, we were all cavemen, cave women. We could go a long time between meals sometimes, not by choice, but because it's really hard to kill a woolly mammoth, even if you have 7 people with spears. And so our systems basically evolved to be able to store energy for a very long time, so that we have protein and fat that we can convert to sugar to use as fuel. Most of our body can use either protein or sugar as fuel or fat, but our brains can only use sugar. That's the only nutrient that we're able to utilize for running our brain, which means we absolutely have to have sugar at all times in our bloodstream. We figured that out as a species and have learned to make sugar. So even though it's absolutely essential for us to live, we don't actually have to ingest any sugar at all. We can make sugar using our protein and fat. So it's great, if you're a caveman. Unfortunately, we're not cavemen anymore. We don't have to go 3 days between meals in the United States. And so we have to learn how to manage this environment. And our evolution just hasn't quite kept up with the drastic changes in our environment. So we have to learn how to eat better, as opposed to just eating less. This means you really don't have to starve yourself to lose weight and to be healthy. And so this is actually a good news thing, that you don't have to have 500 calories per day as opposed to 2,000 calories per day in order to be healthy and in order to lose weight. So this is kind of a busy slide, and I know probably won't be able to see everything too well, but I did just want to emphasize here that what we eat is so important, that you can almost think of food as medicine. And I do tend to think of it as medicine frequently. Yes, certain things that we eat can harm us, but certain things that we eat can really help us to develop a more healthy body, especially as we age. So this just gives you an idea that your brain needs healthy fats, needs vitamin E, needs fiber. Your eyes, we need vitamin A. Your heart needs healthy fats and magnesium and fiber. Your joints, absolutely, we need calcium and vitamin C and vitamin D. There are some other supplements like turmeric, which is a spice and has been proven in studies to help with inflammation and arthritis. Our bones absolutely need calcium and vitamin D, so that we don't have bone loss as we get older. Our muscle mass tends to decrease as we get older, so we need to make sure our potassium levels and our protein levels stay up. Our digestive system tends to slow down as we get older also, and so we need to make sure we have enough fiber to help keep things going, and again, enough healthy fats. And we also have to make sure we eat foods that have good bacteria in them, so that's where our probiotics come in. So eating things that are fermented, or eating yogurt that has healthy probiotics and bacteria in them. But as we get older, besides paying attention to what we do eat, we should also recognize that our metabolism does go down. So if you're a person that can maintain their weight eating 1,800 calories per day, about age 60, that's going to start going down it doesn't go down by much, but if you're not aware of that and don't pay attention to it, you may still be eating the 1,800 calories per day and then slowly gain weight. Most humans in America gain 5 to 10 pounds per year, which again doesn't sound like a lot, but over time can really add up. And so recognizing that our metabolism goes down and that perhaps we should pay attention to that and eat a little bit less starting at about age 60. So what foods should we actually eat more of? And in general, but especially as we get older, eating more protein is super important. And I'll give you a little bit of a number. Again, this is a little controversial on how much protein we should actually take in. But most people are recommending 1.2 to 1.4 grams per kilogram of your ideal body weight. So that means, you know, you look, if you have a BMI of 23, 24, that's your ideal body weight essentially. So you would calculate the amount of protein you would need to eat based on that. And it's hard to get that much protein. Fiber. Fiber not only fills us up, but it helps a lot with digestion. They're finding that it probably helps reduce our risk of colon cancer. So again, extremely important. Fruits, vegetables, vitamins, you know, having vitamin B12 is extremely important. And what happens when we age is we aren't as good at absorbing certain vitamins, especially vitamin B12, but other vitamins as well. And so it's extra especially important as you age to make sure you're getting a variety of foods, all the colors of the rainbow, fruits and vegetables, so that you're making sure you get those vitamins. Seafood is important. Not necessarily just seafood, but the really important thing that's in seafood that's harder to get in other forms of food is omega-3 fatty acids. And that's a particular kind of healthy fat. We'd seen previously a little bit of talking about healthy fat, and seafood is a great way to get that, especially salmon, mackerel, those kinds of seafood. So important, I put it twice. Another important thing, again, is healthy fats. And so besides the omega-3 fatty acids in seafood, other healthy fats that are important would be things like olive oil, avocado oil, peanut oil, all extremely healthy fats that sort of help our building blocks. So what foods should we eat less of? Yeah, I'm sorry, carbohydrates. I know it's rough. Especially refined carbohydrates. So that means carbohydrates that have been processed. So your white flour. And what happens is, especially refined carbohydrates, but any carbohydrate you eat stimulates insulin, as we saw. And so the more carbohydrates that are in your diet, the higher your risk is going to be of pushing over that edge of becoming insulin resistant and then acquiring all the diseases associated with that. Processed oils. This really doesn't have so much to do with weight, but extremely important because, again, ultra-processed foods are really not great for us. And a lot of the oils that we used to cook with are ultra-processed. And so that includes oils such as canola oil, corn oil, vegetable oil, soybean oils. And so I know, you know, a lot of us use these in cooking or to saute or to deep fry. And really, we should be replacing these oils with the healthier oils such as olive, peanut, avocado oil, which all you can actually heat up to very high heats and have no problem cooking with them. They don't change their makeup. Red meat. This is kind of a controversial one still in the nutrition literature. And again, you know, red meat is great. It has a ton of protein. And so it's important for that reason. I'm certainly not saying you shouldn't eat any red meat. But limiting it does seem like it's a good idea. Again, not necessarily for weight, but just to help with cardio protection. Sugary beverages. This is tough because you know, we all give our kids juice and we have soda with meals, and you know, it's they taste great and it's easy to drink a lot of them. And it's a hot day. I think it's going to be 90 degrees out today. My son's in Las Vegas right now. It's probably 110 there, and it's really nice to drink a nice Coke. But what happens when we drink calories is that our bodies don't recognize the calories, and that's why these are so dangerous. You could drink 5,000 calories and still be hungry because your body hasn't realized that what you just drank had calories in it. It's just the way it's absorbed. And so it's especially important to recognize. And then ultra processed foods. I think maybe I've mentioned this once or twice or 5,000 times, but it's just so important that I want everyone to realize that. The food industries love us to eat ultra processed foods because it basically means they have figured out the protein, the fat and sugar ratios that they need to get you to love that food so much that it stimulates your dopamine receptors, meaning you want more and more and more of it. And this is where it may tip over into addiction. Are you addicted to Doritos because you eat the entire bag? Maybe. But even if you're not, it's such a huge dopamine hit that sometimes it's really difficult to stop. And it angers me, of course, that the food industry has such a control over us. And so I love the idea of fighting back a little bit and saying, you know what, we don't need to eat these processed foods all the time. Okay, so I need Star Wars slides in pretty much every presentation I do because my whole family's kind of nerdy, and also because my husband is responsible for making most of my slides, and he's a huge Star Wars fan. So yeah, but this is actually a really important slide because when you think about eating too many carbohydrates or too many ultra processed foods, etc., it doesn't mean we can't ever eat these things. It just means we need to step back a little bit and think. Use your Jedi powers to decide if you really want that Dorito or if maybe you don't need it today. It's basically just being mindful. So when should we eat? Again, be mindful. If you wake up in the morning and breakfast is ready and you're not hungry, maybe you shouldn't eat breakfast. If lunchtime comes around and you're not hungry, maybe you skip lunch that day. If you're halfway through dinner and you get full, that's when you stop. So it's really learning to pay attention to our own hunger cues. Avoid snacks. I know this is kind of a surprise because it used to be recommended we eat 5 or 6 times per day, but it's really been found that we don't need to do that. Doing 3 square meals per day with no snacks in between really, again, gives your pancreas a chance to rest, so it's not seeing so much insulin, so it's able to heal and take a break and recover, and so it really will reduce our risk of developing insulin resistance. Sort of the extreme of avoiding snacks would be intermittent fasting. I'm happy to talk about this more in the question and answer series if people are interested. It's one of my favorite things to talk about. It's the way I eat. And basically, the idea behind intermittent fasting is, again, just giving your pancreas a break. So there's several different ways and methods to do it. The most popular and the one that's been studied the most in the literature is what's called a 16-8 fast, which means you are not eating anything for 16 hours. And then for 8 hours, it's called your eating window. And you eat the same amount of calories you would eat during a wider window, but you're just kind of squishing it together. And this does a couple things. First of all, it makes you more mindful. So, if you know you're going 16 hours without eating and doggone it, you want that first meal you eat to matter and to be delicious. And so you think more about it and pay attention more to what you're eating. So it just increases your mindfulness. And I really think of it as opposed to fasting and then starving yourself by having a carrot. You're fasting and then you're feasting. And so a lot of complaints about intermittent fasting and sort of criticism of it is that, well, you're just starving yourself. And truly you're not. You're choosing to not eat anything during this window, and then you feast during that window and you eat your 1,500 calories, and they're absolutely delicious. If you do choose to consider intermittent fasting, I urge you to talk with your healthcare professional or a nutritionist, because you want to make sure you're getting enough electrolytes during that time. You want to make sure that you're not getting dehydrated during that time. So it is important, if you choose to trial that, to get a little bit more information. Eating protein first. This is interesting. There are some relatively new studies that suggest that if you have steak, potatoes, spinach for dinner, if you eat the steak first and the spinach and then eat your potatoes, the carbohydrates are actually metabolized in a very different way and tend not to spike blood sugar as much. So if you do choose to have, potatoes or pasta or whatever for as a side for dinner, try to save it till the end. And it actually helps reduce your risk of, again, developing insulin resistance. What I will also say is that if you save the carbohydrates to the end and you're eating mindfully, sometimes you won't be hungry anymore. And so you'll say, okay, I guess I'll just eat half of my baked potato because I'm full. And also make sure you stop eating a couple hours before bed. Definitely it helps with weight because, if you're eating right before bed, you don't sleep as well, and lack of sleep is definitely linked to increased weight. Also, eating before bed increases your risk of reflux, which, isn't great. So that's a hard one because nighttime snacking is fun, but it's, if you, again, just give yourself a timeout and think about it before you do it and say, do I really want to eat this right before I'm going to sleep? Because I know that it's going to do all these potentially bad things. And then, of course, sometimes you're allowed to say yes, and sometimes you'll say no, and that's okay. But at least you're making an informed decision instead of just sort of reflexively grabbing something. All right, so this is baby Yoda, which actually his name is Grogu. And this is my plug for intermittent fasting. And again, sort of emphasizing that if you do choose to do this, you need to make sure you're getting in your electrolytes. So when you're fasting, you're not absolutely skipping everything. You're drinking plenty of water, you're putting electrolytes in your water, or you're drinking coffee, you're drinking tea, and you're drinking broth. All of those things to help keep your body going. And it definitely helps to stave off hunger so that you don't get hungry during your fasting, but it also helps to kind of keep your metabolism going. And to recognize that, we're able to manipulate our own minds. So, if it's 8 o'clock in the morning and you're planning to not eat until 10 and your body says, hey, I'm hungry. Maybe your body really is hungry, or maybe it's just that dopamine section of your brain that's saying, I really want you to have something sweet and sugary right now. And so we are able to take a step back and say, maybe I really do just need to have some broth or some water, and that's enough. And so thinking that through, maybe trying the broth and water first, see if that helps stave off hunger. And then if it doesn't, then yeah, maybe it's time to eat. But again, just taking it a little bit slow and thinking it through a little bit. So how much should we all be eating? Usually when I'm talking to patients about weight, I don't really focus a lot on calories. Again, I feel like it's more the quality of the calories and not exactly how many calories you're intaking that matters more, and paying attention to your own cues. So this first saying is hara hachi bu. It's a Japanese saying, which basically means do not eat until you are full. If you think about it, it's not that our stomach gets full of food. That's not what makes us full. It's the hormones that the stomach lining releases. So we have to give those hormones a chance to release themselves, get into our system, be absorbed into our bloodstream. So, maybe you wait 20 minutes and see if you're still hungry after you've eaten about 75 to 80% of what you think you should eat. And that's what this basically means. It's eat until you're about 75 to 80% full. And then you see how you do. And most of the time you give it 15, 20 minutes, you won't be hungry anymore because your hormones have kind of caught up. You do not have to clean your plate. This is something difficult because we were all told as kids, you have to eat every single morsel before you get away from this table or before you have your dessert. And And really, we're teaching our kids then to overeat. And so it's okay to stop halfway through. If you're full, you're full. So this next, you do need a calorie deficit to lose weight. I know sounds a little bit contradictory to what I'm saying because we're not focusing on calories. But again, if you are concentrating more on the quality of the calories, the amount of calories will just naturally decrease. So you don't have to think about it. You don't have to count them. It just kind of happens by it. Feels like it happens by itself because you're being more mindful and thinking. And again, realizing that we do require fewer calories as we get older. And so just kind of keeping that in mind and knowing that, that we have to pay attention to that starting at around age 60 and just paying attention to ourselves. So food is delicious. I love fasting because that means I get to feast. It can be fun. It can be social. Food should be fun and social. It should be enjoyable. And so certainly that has to be one of the messages that we tell people, that if you are planning to lose weight, that doesn't mean you have to ignore how delicious food is or pretend like you don't like to eat. It just means paying attention and making sure that what you eat matters and knowing why you're eating it, and treating it as medicine as well as enjoyment, that what you eat can make you healthier as well as make you enjoy your life more. I would also like to say that, let's say you are trying to treat your high blood pressure, or your weight. Eating food and using the food as medication has a lot less side effects than a lot of those medications we prescribe. Yes, I am an MD. I prescribe medications all the time, but everything we put into our body has potential side effects, and food definitely has less side effects than some of those medications. Speaking of which, I'm just going to quickly give you, these are sort of the main medications that we utilize for weight loss. Some of them are off-label, such as metformin. What I find interesting about this slide is that a lot of these medications, including metformin, including the GLP-1 agonists, GLP-GIP agonists, are actually medications used for diabetes. And again, I think that just speaks to the fact that when we treat diabetes, when we treat insulin resistance, we are treating weight, that they are all so interconnected that it's really difficult to tease them all out. And then that's okay, because really what we're after is not looking great in your swimsuit for the summer. Maybe that's a good thing, but it's not really why all of us are concerned about our own weight. We really want to be healthy. We want to be around. We want to have a good quality of life. We want to be able to get out and do things. And so treating the insulin resistance rather than just focusing on the scale will help us do that. It'll help us cure our fatty liver, our high blood pressure, et cetera, et cetera. And so I think that's really the take-home message I want us all to realize, is that there are many different prongs and approaches to helping us get a handle on our health. And we can use as many of those as is necessary. So we start with our dietary changes. And if that's not enough, then we do consider adding medication. And we have to remember that we have to focus on mindfulness and thinking through things and the behavioral changes that come along with that. And we have to remember that exercise is important. And we have to remember that how much sleeping is important. There's just so many different things to think about when we want to approach helping to fix our insulin resistance. And with that, I will end and would love to take some questions.
Dr. Cheung, thank you so much for that presentation. I have had the privilege of knowing you for many years, and so we've talked about many of these things often informally, and yet again, I learned so much from this presentation. Why drinking calories is so bad for us, why we crave junk food, what it is that makes us feel hungry, many things that were new to me. And I confess I was pretty overwhelmed by that complicated slide about how we metabolize. I think it was about how we metabolize food, but you really have a knack for putting things in plain English. So thank you for that really great presentation. We have a ton of questions already. I had prepared a whole bunch of my own. but I'm going to maybe start with a couple of those, but then go immediately to the Q&A because we have lots of questions for people who are here today. The first thing I do want to ask you though is you talked a little bit at the, a couple times you talked about food as medicine. And when I first met you many years ago, as you mentioned, you're board certified in pediatrics. When I met you, you were a family practice physician. I'm really curious what led you to decide to specialize in weight management and nutrition.
I'm so glad you asked that question, because it's very, very personal for me. And it makes me think of one of the previous lectures in your series in the webinar when talking about alcohol, and the presenter had problems with alcohol himself. And I think that really hits home for a lot of us. And for me, I've struggled with weight my whole life. And about 8 years ago was diagnosed with prediabetes, which basically means I had probably been insulin resistant for at least 10 years prior to that. And that was scary. I'm a primary care doctor. I know, I see what diabetes does to people. I did not want that. And so I really started to delve deep into how can I get a handle on this and have it last. Of course, I'd tried 5 million diets before, like most of us have that have struggled with weight our whole life. But it was really just figuring out how can I find something that's sustainable, that I'm not going to resent. If you choose a diet that you resent and hate and don't want to do forever, don't even start it, because I'm planning to live another 40 years. I want to like eating, so I have to find something that's sustainable enough that I can enjoy it and still go about my life. And so that's really what started me down the path of how can I help people still enjoy food while eating healthfully and losing weight and getting control of their medical issues such as prediabetes.
Well, that's actually a great segue into one of the questions that was posed. So many of us know that we eat poorly and we want to do better, but our habits are pretty deeply embedded. So do you have any advice for how we can learn to do the things that we kind of already know we need to do?
Again, so I have to go back to one of the previous webinars, which the decluttering webinar. And one of the main things they were talking about that is cognitive behavioral therapy. So really focusing in on how do we change behavior? And that is 100% what we have to do when we think about changing behaviors surrounding eating, because yes, these habits are absolutely ingrained in us. But the exciting news is because we are human, we can change our own thoughts. And that's really where cognitive behavioral therapy comes in. There's something called the think, feel, act cycle, which I first heard of on a really awesome podcast by Katrina Ubell called Weight Loss for Busy Physicians, I think is the name of it, but anybody can listen to it. It's not just physicians. It's a great podcast. And so she talks a lot about this cycle, which is, if we tell ourselves, okay, I'm going to change my action and never eat popcorn again, that's tough. Changing the action is difficult. If a doctor tells you don't ever eat popcorn and doesn't tell you why, are you likely to continue that? Probably not. You need to know why you're doing it and why you shouldn't do it. And so as opposed to attempting to just change our actions, we need to change our thoughts about popcorn. So I can tell myself popcorn is a carbohydrate, and I know that I have prediabetes, meaning I shouldn't eat as many carbohydrates. So even though I like popcorn, maybe I should eat less of it. I don't have to tell myself that I'm never eating popcorn again, but I do have to tell myself I recognize that this food I enjoy also increases my blood sugar. And then my action will most likely, at least some of the time, be that I don't eat as much popcorn or that I choose not to eat the popcorn. So it's truly just changing your thoughts about these foods and then letting the actions flow as they will and trusting the process. And also realizing it takes a long time to change a habit. If you can't do it all in one day. So I think the studies say that usually if you're trying to change a habit, you have to do it over and over again for about 3 weeks. So, if you think about it in terms of food, it's like, okay, well, there's going to be times where I know I shouldn't eat the popcorn, and I shouldn't really pick on popcorn. It's actually not a bad carbohydrate. It's got some fiber. So, so nobody think that you're not allowed to eat popcorn. I promise it's all right. It just happens to be one of the things that I love the most. So I have to pay attention. But again, see, so that's going to be different for everybody, too. I'm not a huge sweets fan, so I don't have to fight so hard on eating sweets. But some people, every single time they finish dinner, it's their habit to have dessert. And so that's the habit they're going to have to break. And so they'll have to think differently about dessert. And maybe it's not an everyday thing. Maybe you can change your thought to saying, I can have dessert twice a week, and you pick it. You don't let somebody else pick it for you. You tell yourself, here's what I've chosen to do. And that's really the crux of figuring out a diet that's going to last forever, is picking it yourself. If you follow a plan, you may lose weight, but keeping it off is not going to happen until you're in charge of choosing what you do.
You were talking about me for much of that. So thank you for that advice. And I will be working on my thoughts changing the way I'm thinking about food to change my actions. So that's really helpful. We have so many questions about oils. People are asking about macadamia oil, avocado oil, grapeseed oil, coconut oil. I don't know if you can remember that whole list, but I'm curious, can you give some guidance about what oils are best for people to use and which they might want to avoid?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the less processed an oil is, the better. And so when you look at the canola, the corn oils, they're just highly processed. They go through this. They're not just, you don't just take the corn and squish it and have the oil and sell it. It's going through a huge process of heating and additives being put in it. And so that's really what makes it so bad. It's not the corn itself that's bad. And so it's the same thing with these other oils. Macadamia oil, pretty much they just take the macadamia nuts and squish them and sell you the oil. So that's actually quite a good one, which is why most of the nut oils are great, peanut oil included, because they aren't as processed. And coconut oil, there's a little bit of controversy about coconut oil, but most of the studies that I've seen at least suggest that it's one of the fats that's considered good. It is a solid at room temperature, meaning it's a saturated fat. And so there is some argument that too much saturated fat can increase cardiovascular disease. So again, it's a little bit of a controversial thing, but most studies are suggesting that at least in moderation, coconut oil is considered okay. I am not sure about grapeseed oil, so I'm going to skip that one and not answer it about that one because I'm not sure.
Right. So we have at least 2 questions about Weight Watchers, wondering your thoughts. And I guess this kind of goes back a little bit to this question of how do we get out of these bad habits? So at least one person said they've been a member for years and it really helped to educate them about nutrition, but that they still don't feel like they're losing weight. So just if you have any thoughts about Weight Watchers or programs like that, really, where TOPS or other programs where people kind of come together to learn about nutrition and lose weight together.
Absolutely, yes. I don't want to diss on Weight Watchers because a lot of people are really successful with it. But there are some problems with the model. And really, Weight Watchers is a calorie restriction. So you're eating throughout the day, you're counting points, you're not allowed to eat beyond a certain amount of points. And so something that can happen if you're not getting enough calories is your body's sort of constantly in a little bit of a hunger state. And eventually your metabolism is going to reduce itself because it doesn't want you in a hunger state. It's no fun. And so our mechanism is to reduce our metabolism. What that means is now you're needing less calories. And so in order to lose weight, you're going to have to reduce the calorie count even more, which is why eventually people with any diet will stop losing weight because our bodies kind of catch up and figure out what's going on and do everything they can to keep the calories on. Because again, we're cavemen still in our bodies' brains. And we want to make sure that we're okay for those long potential fasting periods. And so eventually, following a calorie restricted diet for too long, your metabolism just gets so low that that you feel kind of crappy. And then most people will say, I'm not losing weight anymore and I'm not feeling good. And so I'm going to stop this diet. And that's what happens. That being said, utilizing a Weight Watchers model and plugging in some of these other healthy eating habits can be really helpful. So you can have a Weight Watchers diet. You get all the coaching, you get the support, which is so important, so important. You get accountability. You're going in to see your counselor once a week to weigh in or whatever. And that has been proven to be extraordinarily helpful. That's actually one thing in my clinic we do also. They'll see me at least every 6 weeks. They see my nutritionist every 6 weeks. They see a behavioral health person. Like the more people you see and the closer those visits are, the more likely you are to be successful. So Weight Watchers does that wonderfully. And you can also, you can do an intermittent fasting within the Weight Watchers structure. You can do a low carb diet within the Weight Watchers structure. So you still have a lot of leeway and choices that you can make, while still following that program. So I think just following the Weight Watchers program by itself probably isn't great, but if you are able to incorporate some of these other sort of healthy ways of eating where you don't feel hungry all the time, it can be a really helpful model.
And so I think what I'm hearing you say is for any of these things that we're talking about, if it's working for you, that's great. And continue to do what's working for you. If it isn't working for you, don't necessarily feel like it's you that's failed. Maybe you need a different model or a different approach to use. Was that fair to say?
Totally fair to say. That's exactly right. And it's funny, if you think of it in terms of food, you can also think of it in terms of medicine. So some of those weight loss medicines, you'll give phentermine to one person and it works amazingly. And then you give it to someone else and it does nothing. And so, there's no one answer for everybody. Even Ozempic doesn't work for everybody, I promise. And so you just really have to think things through, try things. You want to make sure you give it a fair shake. So again, like if you try Weight Watchers for 2 days and say, oh, it didn't work, of course that's not a reasonable amount of time to try it. So you do want to give it a fair try. And if you find it something that you think you could do forever, then give whatever you're trying 3 or 4 weeks and see how you do. And also recognize that you're going to have plateaus on whatever dietary plan you choose. And a true plateau isn't considered a plateau until about 4 to 6 weeks have gone by of no weight loss. So if you're following Weight Watchers and it's been 2 weeks and you haven't lost any weight, keep doing Weight Watchers. Doesn't mean it's failed yet. You really want to give it a fair shake before you make those decisions.
We have at least a couple questions about sleep. You mentioned that at the end of your presentation, but we haven't talked much about that. Can you talk about the role of sleep?
Yeah, so it's these are basically, we don't know the mechanisms of why sleep matters, so we only have sort of a correlation. But what we have found is that if you don't get at least 6 hours, preferably 7 to 8 hours of sleep per day, you are much higher risk of increasing weight. It probably, again, has to do with sort of hormones that are released during sleep, or giving our bodies a break and helping us kind of fix our metabolism during that time when you're sleeping. So really, we should all be aiming for 6 to 8 hours of sleep for health overall, but also for help with weight. The good news about that is it doesn't have to be all at once. And so, I have a lot of patients that will wake up at 2 a.m. and be up for an hour and think that, oh, great, I've blown it. And thankfully, that's not true. If you think about in Europe where there's siestas and everybody goes home after, mid-afternoon and sleeps for an hour or two and then comes back, and then, that counts. So if you take a 2-hour nap in the middle of the day and then sleep for 4 to 5 hours that night, that's great. You got it. So it doesn't have to be all in one fell swoop, which I think is really helpful, at least for me, because, I used to, you wake up at 2 a.m. and your brain starts going over everything it's done wrong your entire life. And then, an hour's gone by and you're feeling more and more upset with yourself. So you don't have to do that. You can just say, okay, I'm awake. It's okay. Even if I'm going to wait for an hour, I'll be able to sleep for another 2. So, again, sort of cognitive behavioral therapizing yourself and just telling yourself, it's okay that I'm taking this break from sleep. I'll catch it up.
That's actually great to hear because I know as I get older, my sleep habits are very disrupted. And on the weekends, I crave a nap, maybe more than I used to when I was younger. So, as we're thinking about the impact of all of this on older adults, that feels really important. Can you also talk a little bit about exercise? Again, it's something you mentioned we haven't talked too much about, but how important
Yes.
is exercise and how does that fit with nutrition?
Yeah, I'm so glad you asked because I do want to, I don't talk a lot about exercise up front when we discuss weight loss, because if you are trying to utilize exercise as your main way for losing weight, you are setting yourself up to fail. Pretty much all the studies across the board are saying if you are a vigorous exerciser, so you're doing sort of moderate exercise throughout the week, you can expect about a 3-pound weight loss, which for most of us is not a lot. And so to expect exercise or an increase in exercise to be the main way to lose weight is not going to work. That being said, exercise is extraordinarily important for many other things. The main way it's important for weight is that it is really important for helping to maintain weight loss. So once you've lost that 20 pounds, if you want to keep it off, make sure you're exercising. If you're not exercising, your likelihood of regaining that weight goes way up. So that's one way that exercise is extraordinarily important just in the construct of weight. But it's also important for so many other things, right? You sleep much better if you're exercising. It's absolutely important for your cardiovascular health. Especially as you get older, exercise is important for maintaining muscle mass and bone strength. And so that means, not just walking, it means doing some weight bearing exercises. The good news is you don't have to be part of a gym to do these. If you're like me, it's hard to get to a gym. Some people don't feel comfortable in a gym, some people don't have transportation to a gym. You don't need that. You can do push-ups against the wall. You can do knee squats. You can do planks. All of these things are weight bearing. And that's just so important to keep up muscle mass because everyone loses muscle mass as we get older. If you are also actively losing weight, you will lose even more muscle mass. And it's been proven to increase mortality, actually. So it's not just that you don't, that you want to look like you have muscle. It truly reduces your mortality to keep your muscle and protein up.
We are coming, I can't believe it. We're coming up at the end of the hour. And Sheri, we have so many questions. I'm going to try to squeeze in just one more. So most of the people, I think, on the call today are either older adults or people working with older adults or people caring with and for older adults. And so being overweight is a problem for some of them, but frailty is also often a problem for older adults. So can you just say a little bit about that and what older adults and their caregivers should be thinking about if frailty is part of what they're struggling with?
Absolutely. And frailty comes for a variety of reasons. Insulin resistance and being overweight is only one thing that can happen as you age. There are other medical issues that can happen, and a lot of those will drastically impact your weight in a negative way, making you lose weight. If you have COPD, for instance, you're utilizing so many calories just to breathe in and out that you really risk weight loss. If you have cancer, you risk having weight loss. And so a lot of those things overlay what we need to be thinking about as we maintain our nutrition. And sometimes weight is not the most important thing to follow. So yes, if you're, struggling with keeping up calories, absolutely the most important thing to do is making sure you're getting enough protein. And then everything else kind of takes a back burner. So again, I used to recommend to people, oh, you've lost weight, just, have milkshakes, eat whatever you can do to gain weight, just do it. And that really turns out to not be helpful, because then, you're gaining fat weight and you're not gaining the healthy weight that you need. So again, making sure your protein level is up and making sure that you're doing weight bearing exercises, especially if you're frail. You fall, you break a hip, that's a huge mortality risk. And so, learning balance is another important part of this. And you don't have to do this alone. A lot of primary care doctors will happily send you to physical therapy to help you with a lot of this. I'm a high fall risk, I need to do some physical therapy, and across the board insurance companies will cover visits like that because they don't want you falling either. And there's so much that can be taught and learned about how to keep yourself healthy and not fall, and keep your strength and your muscle mass up. You don't have to do it alone. So definitely, ask healthcare professionals for help.
Thank you so much. I can't believe a whole hour has slipped by. Apologies to everyone whose questions we didn't get to. Your questions were all great. I hope I was able to consolidate some of them. Dr. Cheung, thank you so much for I've learned a great deal, as always, from you. I also want to thank again AARP Massachusetts, MORE, and the Older Adult Behavioral Health Network for their collaboration in planning the webinar series. And I especially want to thank everyone who joined us today. I wish you a wonderful rest of your day and a lifetime of joyful, healthful eating. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you again.